Well, let me just tell you about my day.
Tell me.
So I woke up this morning, folded some clothes, and got prepared to come here. This was one of my highlights of the day, so I'm super excited to be here.
This voice, the one giving Morgan Freeman a run for his money, belongs to Kris Brown.
Christopher, if I'm in trouble.
Kris lives in Jeffersonville, Vermont, a small, rural town with a whole lot of beauty, but not a ton of career opportunity. So Kris has a knack for developing skills on the spot. He has a lot of entrepreneurial balls in the air. He has to make it all work.
I'm a hustler. I got a lot of irons in the fire, and if my fire ain't full, then it ain't working right.
If you'll indulge me for a moment and lean into that part of your brain that does stereotype people, I want you to picture what Kris looks like. Listening to that deep voice, that low rumble, that African-American vernacular. I wonder, what comes to mind? What do you think of his stature? How about his presence? What about his skin color? If what comes to mind is a 6'2", 275-pound black man, you are spot on. And that uniform, the one he was born into, comes with some, let's call them stereotypical side effects. So you were wearing the uniform for the scary black man.
Absolutely.
Right now on Homegoings, we're rolling out a 4-part series called Stereotypes and demystifying harmful tropes and biases about Black men that have been a part of the racist waters we swim in here in America for a long, long time. Ones like this one. The one about all Black men being dangerous, harmful, menacing, or scary.
With the deep voice, especially with my appearance, when I speak, they're like, whoa, like now you already think that I'm scary. And now you hear the voice that has a rumble to it. Now I'm extra scary.
We're specifically talking with anti-types for this series. The folks who buck the systems they were born into, whether that's by luck or hard work or help from community. And Kris is an anti-type. He's kind, funny, to me, not even a little bit threatening.
Me and my daughter, we do affirmations in the morning before we go. I always make that like a core of our morning.
But some of the stuff Kris did back in the day, I gotta admit, even just hearing about it does scare me a little.
I got myself and 2 other individuals involved, and I was the mastermind behind it, and I committed a robbery.
I think it scared him too. From Vermont Public, this is Homegoings. I'm Myra Flynn, and today is part 2 of a 4-part series we're calling Stereotypes. And to be transparent, this series features all men. This wasn't on purpose. This is just where my reporting took me. A lot of these most troubling, most profound, most dangerous stereotypes apply to Black men. Shocking, I know. So for the better part of 2024, I've been chatting with 4 Black men about the stereotypes that have plagued them their whole lives. Stereotypes like all Black fathers leave.
Like, even though my dad is full of shit, I wish you were around, you know?
Black people are stupid.
I applied for promotions often.
Black men all have huge...
The person was like, oh, I knew it would be big. And I was like, why? Like, what makes you say that?
And today's stereotype, all Black men are scary.
The stereotype goes, you can take the Black man out the hood, but you can't take the hood out the Black man.
All of these men have stories of bucking these stereotypes, hence the anti, but as it tends to be on Homegoings, each journey is pretty darn nuanced. So, settle in. Today we sit down with Kris Brown, a man who is living proof that stereotypes can be motivating, fuel to prove people's perceptions of you wrong.
I wasn't really in a position to be like, how dare you? I had to do what I had to do. I had to swallow that pride and show and prove.
And sometimes stereotypes can be a trap. one you fall into and spend a lifetime trying to get out of.
I had been told, don't be a statistic, don't be a statistic. And here I am being a statistic.
This is Homegoings. We're a proud member of the NPR network. Welcome home.
Hi, I want to tell you about a new series called Reimagining Democracy for a Good Life with me, Angela Glover Blackwell. In it, I turn to organizers and leaders doing work on the ground in Los Angeles to see how they're trying to build a radically inclusive, thriving, multiracial democracy that serves everyone. I believe that is the key to human flourishing. Lessons from LA can inform a vision for the nation. Find Reimagining Democracy for a Good Life now wherever you get your podcasts.
In 2003, I graduated high school. My family had plans for me to go to the community college, and I wanted to leave.
Kris Brown has never been one for systems, especially the required ones.
And I went on, and I would proceed to go in the front door and walk out the back door and just get cool with some friends. And I'm from a small town, so my mother knew my professor, and she was like, how's Kris doing in school? And he was like, I ain't seen your son in 3 weeks.
Back in the day, cutting class was a norm for Kris. At the time, he didn't care if the decisions he made were good for him or not. He just cared that they were his to make. So eventually, he dropped out.
I joined the military, did my military service, went to Iraq, and came home. And one of the things they ask you about in Iraq, when you come home, it was like, do you have any trauma? And we weren't for sure what trauma was at that time. So it was like, no, I'm good. Like, I was in a war torn. I've seen people die. Like, it's okay. I know that. But, it really affects you.
After his time spent in the military, Kris says his threshold for pain became higher and higher in a way he could never quite get back on the other side of. Like, once you've seen all the bad in people, how can you assume the good? And if you're not assuming there's any good in others, what's the point in trying to look for it in yourself?
I had hit a hard time. I was still in the military, and I hit a very hard time in my life, and I committed a robbery. I got myself and 2 other individuals involved, and I was the mastermind behind it, and I committed a robbery. But it was a lot more that went into it because I didn't know what I was doing. I ended up going to prison for 4 years.
Kris was still in the Army when he landed himself in prison in the state of New York, where he was stationed after serving overseas. But this wasn't Kris's first robbery. He says he'd been doing it for a while because he'd convinced himself that maybe he was something of a hero.
We used to rob drug dealers because it was kind of like the Robin Hood. We take from y'all and give to us and, the people that don't have it. So, yeah.
Is this hard for you to talk about with me?
A little. It's I know that it is a part of who I am. And it's a part of why I'm here today, I feel like when I did go to prison, that was for all the times that I didn't get caught, So I got my karma back.
Kris remained in prison through some pretty formative years for a young man, aged 23 to 27. And prison was one system that humbled him to his core. It wasn't like school, where he had a choice in the matter, or the Army, where there was some end in sight, even if that end was a violent one. No, prison was just a long, long stretch of time. And then more time. Nothing but time to try to think about ways to pass the time.
I remember when I got sentenced, I thought it was the end of the world. Like, I was not going to see the light of day again. There was no way that I could make it 4 years.
How did you make it 4 years? What was it like inside?
It wasn't the best. you made do of what you had. It was a lot of people. It was everybody from small time, just drug addicts who did little petty crimes that just keep coming to prison. It's a lot of fights. It's a lot of pent up aggression. Even I got in a few tussles here and there, but I mean, it was just the jungle. You got to fight. I lost a lot.
According to the Department of Justice, currently, just under 2% of all Black men in the country are in prison. That's all Black men. And that number is an improvement. Back in 1999, the number was closer to 5%. According to a Duke University study, 1 in 5 Black men born in 2001 will end up in prison at some point in their lives. And that number is also an improvement. A Black man born in 1981, Kris's generation, had the odds of 1 in 3. A third of all Black men born that year were considered statistically doomed to end up incarcerated. This is why, when it comes to Black men, we don't just call incarceration. This is the mass in the mass incarceration. And it can be daunting when you end up in its grip.
I was scared. Straight up. I can say it now. I was scared because I knew what a statistic was. I had been told, don't be a statistic. Don't be a statistic. And here I am being a statistic.
There's an urban myth that's been spread for a few decades now. It's a myth that says certain states look at the reading levels and language performance of third grade students to determine how many prison beds and cells should be available in the future. In other words, using poor performance in third grade as a determining factor for criminal behavior. We checked this out, can't find anything factual surrounding this pervasive myth, and state officials and correctional officers also denounced this claim. But while they deny using elementary school test scores, what's interesting is what they say they are using as determining factors for planning prison population in the future. For planning prison population. What a sentence. Planning prison population. Along with hundreds of other metrics, state officials said that they take into account population growth, arrest rates, and demographic data such as the number of 18 to 28-year-old men in the state. So while they may not be using literacy scores as an indicator, they are literally banking on the idea that a certain number of young men of a certain demographic will end up in jail. Young men like Kris. Kris was released from prison at 27. The physical one, at least. But at this point in the story, Kris had earned himself more than a few threatening Black man stripes. So even outside the cell walls, was he really free? How was the world treating you?
I was very lost. I didn't know how I was going to survive after the military. I thought that only thing that I could be was a rapper. I had to work under the table for money. People have to pay me way cheaper than what I'm worth. And I had to just figure something out, just make music or just make something happen.
Kris did figure something out, but he didn't make it easy on himself. As a big Black walking stereotype, he chose one of the whitest states in the Union to move to, Vermont, a far cry from the uber Black prison demographic he'd just come from in New York. Why Vermont? Why did you move to Vermont?
I was married at the time, and I met my wife in the military, and she had the opportunity to come to Vermont to go to warrant officer school. When I first came to Vermont, I didn't know how parole worked. They said in order to move places, you have to get in a stable address, you got to do this and you got to do that. But I wasn't for sure of the order. So in the time of me coming back and forth to Vermont, I was doing a lot of other illegal activities to make money.
Well, I'm going to have to ask you what those illegal activities are. Are you willing to share them?
Oh, I used to sell drugs.
So the irony of robbing a drug dealer and then becoming a drug dealer, is that irony? Is that not lost on you?
My ex used to sit up and bag drugs with me at night. And I remember one time I told her, how the tables have turned, going from robbing a drug dealer to being a drug dealer. So, because I knew I needed money. And I didn't think that there was anything else that I could do to make ends meet. So I just started selling drugs again.
At this point in Kris's story, he's not even 30, and he's upgraded from robbery to dealing. On top of it all, he and his wife had 3 children together, so the need to provide was now bearing down on him as well. During this time, Kris says that even life essentials felt out of grasp, like a place to live.
I've rented hotels, and we've moved out our apartment, looking in all these places, and then you get the, are you a felon? Or have you ever been, accused of a felon? And I was like, yes, 2nd degree. And my charge was 2nd degree armed robbery. And I was like, yes. And I'm standing there with me, my wife at the time, and my 3 kids. And I got denied probably like 12 to 15 times before I ended up getting a place. And I remember I begged my landlord. I was like, look, man, I told my family to stay in the car, and I took them away, and I was like, look, man, I don't have nowhere. I don't have nothing else. Like, this is all I got. Like, please let me stay here. I was like, I'll do anything. He was like, I'm not really for sure. But then I had backing, military backing, and help, to get me in a place. And I remember he stood in my living room, or our living room, because I was just renting the property. And he was like, I don't know how you gonna stay here. I don't see how you gonna live here and pay your rent. So y'all don't get too comfortable. And he said it in front of my family. And he was like standing face to face, and he was like, just don't get too comfortable. And like, that shit struck a fire in me, because I was like, how dare you say that to me? But, I wasn't really in a position to be like, how dare you? I was barely getting in a place, and I had to do what I had to do. I had to swallow that pride and show and prove.
When we come back, Kris learns that one of the attributes he's been stereotyped for his whole life is his ticket out of hardship.
I used to have people tell me that all the time. I'd be like, man, I wonder if I can get paid for that.
That's right after this.
Homegoings has support from Rutland Regional Medical Center, rooted in the commitment to equitable and inclusive healthcare access for all patients. Learn more at rrmc.org. And by the Vermont Arts Council, working to center creativity, art, and culture for everyone throughout Vermont. Learn more about programs, resources, and grant opportunities at vermontartscouncil.org.
Welcome back to Homegoings. Today, we're speaking with Kris Brown. And at this point in the story, Kris is fresh out of jail, and he and his family have moved to Vermont. They're struggling to build a life there because it's a very white state. Kris is selling drugs, just falling deeper and deeper into the stereotype of the scary, threatening Black man. And he's beginning to decide that it's time for a change. He can't keep living like this anymore. Also, at this point in our interview, Kris opened up and started answering all the questions. We kind of just had a conversation. Here it is.
I had stopped selling drugs. I couldn't set up shop here. I had my children. I was in a not the best situation, so I couldn't really just do what I wanted to do. I couldn't hustle. So when I was incarcerated, I was doing asbestos removal. It took me like 3 months to get hired because they had to run a criminal background. I was still on parole, and they had to get questions, and they had to reach out to this person. So I applied for the job, I believe, in like the end of July. And I didn't start working until like mid-October. The reason why I left my job at doing asbestos removal is because I got called the N-word, straight up. I got called the N-word, And the guy who called me that, the manager, was his cousin. And then after he said it, we had to ride back from Middlebury to Burlington touching shoulders. And I couldn't do anything. I just had to hold it. So when I got back, I told my boss, like the head guy, and he was like, hey, so-and-so, did you hear it? And he was like, nah, I ain't hear nothing. So it was like nobody stood up for me. It was 4 white guys against 1 black guy. And everybody was like, nah, I didn't hear nothing. So I lost my shit and stormed out the door and told him I couldn't work there anymore. In this time, I had started to go to culinary school. So I went to New England Culinary in Montpelier, and I met a lot of great people in there, and I graduated and I became the manager. It became like a cool thing, but at the same time, realizing what was happening. A server would have a problem at the table, and they would come to me and be like, hey, Kris, table 32 has a problem. And this time I was in great shape. I had long hair. My hair was usually in a bun. And I would go to the table and I'd be like, hey, I just, heard that there was a problem at the table. And they would be like, oh, no, there was no problem. Everything was great. And I was like, oh, okay, just wanted to make sure. Are you sure? And they were like, oh, no, everything was fantastic. The server was great. The food was great. We were completely happy. And I'll be like, okay. And I would go back to the server and be like, they said they were fine. And they'll be like, that's a lie. They just told me all of this stuff. And then I started to realize they didn't want the confrontation with me. I definitely had confrontations within the restaurant industry. One gentleman told me that I hope that you have money saved up because I want to take your job. And that is the one time I lost my shit in the restaurant. Like, I would pull my shirt out, unbutton. I was like, yo, let's go outside. Like, I really, lost it. And one of my best friend, his name's Quinn, he's bigger than me. And he kind of grabbed me and, pulled me in the back. He was like, chill out, man. And I was like, you're right. I'm sorry. Let me just go breathe.
It sounds like some of the stereotypes not only fit at different times in your life, but have deeply affected how you see yourself and people see you. This all black men are threatening thing. And it seems like every time you try to ratchet up a notch, get out of your circumstance. So, okay, I'm going to quit selling drugs and I'm going to use this license of asbestos removal. You go to the asbestos removal place and you're getting, called the N-word, and, so you flip it and you go to culinary school so that you can become, a chef or a manager or learn how to work in the service industry world. And then boom, right back to that same stereotype. At what point in your life did you try to ratchet up a notch and it worked?
Throughout this whole time that I've been in the culinary industry, I've always heard, oh, you got this amazing voice. Your voice is deep. You can read me a bedtime story. I got all these compliments and things.
But also it's the very thing that scared people about you. But you would also get compliments?
I got compliments 2 times a day at my job. Constantly, every day. Every day I was there, I would tell people, let me watch, somebody's going to compliment me. I wasn't being cocky, it was just the fact of the matter that that's the way it was. And there was other people who was very intimidated by it. And I was like, hey, it's kind of like a power thing that I have, but I just need to learn how to do the power. A lady there was telling me, she was like, you ever heard of, this voiceover school? And I was like, nah. So I ended up going to a class, sitting in, didn't say anything purposely. And then he was like, hey, can you read something? And I was like, yeah. It was like everybody in the room was like, whoa. And he was like, yo, you have a voice. And so, I went from there, and then I just completely locked in. It was like, I can't work for nobody. Like, I've went to college to do this job, and I can't work in this environment because of my skin color. So I'm just going to be my own entrepreneur. Like, I'm just going to do voiceovers.
So can you list some of the accomplishments that you've made with your voice, like what you've done?
Absolutely. I've did a winter campaign with the Vermont Department of Tourism and Marketing. The end of the trail is only the beginning. Start planning. I worked with a person on YouTube who makes cartoons, and I did an overseas series. It was over in the Hainan Islands. It was kind of like a Vermont PBS show. I currently have a movie coming out. Not me, I don't. It's just my voice is the main character in the movie. I'm narrating a movie.
And we're in the same field.
Oh, yes, I have a podcast. I forgot about that.
What would you do without me? Lord, you have a whole podcast.
Okay, yes, I do have a podcast. It's called Conversations with Kris. When I got out of the food industry, I was trying to be a voiceover artist, and cannabis was becoming legal in Vermont, and I was like, I can be the voice of cannabis.
You're still dabbling a little bit in the drug world, even on the other side of it, right? So, like, what's that about? Is there something about you that can't let go of just wanting to test these waters?
So, I'm a combat veteran, and I'm not going to say like I do. I deal with some issues, and I feel like cannabis has been a big supporter of me calming those vibrations, calming down those noises, and just putting me at ease. And now for them same people who are growers and making hash makers and manufacturers and dispensary owners, now I feel like it's a time for us to be highlighted.
Kris Brown, thank you for speaking with me in that awesome voice and for sharing your story with us. You don't seem scary to me at all. And as you know, homies, here on the show, we do our best to save time for a deep listen. Today, we're sharing Kris's answer to my last question from our interview together. His words made me cry right there in the studio, and it doesn't get deeper than this.
My final question to you is, to the people out there who stereotype people like you, Black men, all Black men are threatening, all Black men who have been incarcerated are never going to make anything of themselves, all Black men are dangerous. Once you have participated in something illegal, you're always going to be that way. You're never going to get better. What do you say to those people now?
I understand why you feel that way. But imagine if it was your child who made a mistake and he was that felon. I mean, and I say that on the white side. Imagine if it was your child that made a mistake, became a part of the quote-unquote drug world. It would be more so of, but he's a good kid. He just got caught up with the wrong people. Why is it different between your child and my mother's, me? You know, everybody gets caught up in problems. I guess I don't want to say some stereotypes ring true, but it's sometimes kind of they do. Even white people have stereotypes. But at the same time, it's all flowers don't bloom when you think. Sometimes in order for a seed to grow, it has to go through a lot of shit, essentially. That fertilizer, those chemicals that you can't intake in yours, but it helps you grow. And once you get to where you realize you need to grow, where that sunlight is at, it's off to the races. And now you're more than what you knew, but you had to start at below ground level. Some people weren't afforded the opportunity to have all this good stuff given to them. They had to come from the bottom. And I'm lucky to say that I came from the bottom twice.
Kris Brown, again, thank you for sharing your hard-earned wisdom with us. We can't wait to see what you do moving forward. And thank you so much for listening to Homegoings. It's been a pleasure being here with you. This is part 2 of what we hope will be an ongoing series for us here on the show called Stereotypes. We're going to tackle a couple more in the weeks ahead, but if you have a suggestion or a stereotype that we haven't addressed yet here on the show, write to us at hey@homegoings.co. We'd love to hear from you. This episode was co-reported by me and our associate producer, James Stewart, with help from Vermont Public's data journalist, Corey Doxer. James also did the mix. Saeed Tijan Thomas Jr. and I edited this episode, and I composed our theme music. All other music by Miles Hooper and Blue Dot Sessions. Our Homegoings artist portraits for this special series was the effort of a team of graphic designers, Elodie Reed, Laura Nakasaka, and Zoe McDonald. This week's image features Kris's smiling, gentle face. Check it out at homegoings.co. While you're there, you can sign up for our bi-monthly newsletter. See you next week. That's right, next week for part 3 of our Stereo Anti-Type series as we tackle a big one that's hurt a lot of people for a really long time. The stereotype that all Black people are stupid. If you have thoughts, reflections, or asks of me as your host about who we should talk to or what we should explore next on the show, write to me at hey@homegoings.co. You can also give us a follow on Instagram at @wearehomegoings. As always, you are welcome here.
It's just, you don't know how much this means to me right now. Play my voice through the whole thing, and they'll hear me. The universe has plans for me, I know.
New from the Embedded podcast. Female athletes have always needed grit and talent. But for decades, they've also needed a certificate.
There was chit-chat about, is that really a woman?
And even now, they're still being checked and questioned. Their story is the newest series from CBC and NPR's Embedded. It's called Tested. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.